So the Wilson Pro Staff is my favorite racket in the Wilson line, and it's also the racket I think they should get rid of. So I'm going to explain it right now. Before you unsubscribe from this channel, hear me out. So I think there are two cataclysmic events that happened over the last few months. Maddie Keys won the Australian Open, and Stefanos Tsitsipas has gotten his groove back with the Pure Aero 98 and win in Doha. So what this brings to mind is they both transitioned from the Wilson blade, and Maddie was able to hit with a little bit heavier shots, easier access to spin. She looked really good winning the Aussie Open. And Tsitsipas was moving much better. I'm not sure that's due to the racket, but his forehand had extra zip. He was confident hitting it, going for his bigger shots. Backhand too, I think someone showed a stat where his backhand effectiveness was quite high during that tournament. So a coach, a pro asked me about this, and he was like, yeah, so what would Tsitsipas use in the Wilson line if he wasn't using a Pure Aero 98? And it made me think that, yeah, there isn't anything that has been marketed to be the performance spin racket from Wilson. So let's go through this, and I'm going to go through each racket, and then first of all, what my impression as a store owner and also as a consumer has been, and then what I think Wilson should shift to make, to modernize their line. So we have the blade, the Wilson blade, typical control, and one of the more popular ones that's on tour and endorsed. The Ultra, I'd say this is their power line. So it's more comfortable than at least the previous version of the Pure Drive. And then we have the RF series. I have the Future with me right here. So that was a line that was introduced by Federer and Wilson, and it was thought to be the line that would be a more modern take on Federer's game. So then you have the Pro Staff, which has a long history, control-oriented line. Then this is the Pro Staff 97. Then we have the Shift, which was using the bend-in technology. I think you guys have all heard the spiel on the Shift, where it gives you tons of spin, and it does give you lots of spin. It's also a little bit, gets pushed around against heavier opponents. And then the Clash, which people say, yes, this is our comfort racket, right? And I think for me, like every time I've heard about the Clash, I've heard about like if you have arm issues, use the Clash. Right? So if you guys can see, ladies can see as well, what's the apparent problem here is that there isn't a clearly defined silo of power, spin, and control. First of all, we have the Pro Staff and the blade. And I actually have a friend who has both of these rackets, and he's like, yeah, that the blade is a little different from the Pro Staff, and the Pro Staff gives him some of this, blade gives him some of that. But the reality is that they are quite similar. I mean, the blade may be more for baseline bashers, Pro Staff a little bit more for an all-court game, but they are control-oriented rackets. And given that Federer is no longer playing, and I don't think you really have a big player on, I mean, maybe Ons Jabeur endorses the Pro Staff 97. Grigor is sort of all over the place with his rackets. So I'm not really sure who is going to take the helm of this. And given that the market is shifting away from control-oriented rackets, at least in the Pro Tour, like you're seeing more players using more powerful rackets to help counteract the slower courts, the fluffier balls, etc. My take is get rid of the Pro Staff. It's my favorite racket, but it's just not helping the entire series. And keep the blade. Keep the blade as your control racket. Have sort of the uber control, like the performance level of the blade be like the 1820. Then sort of like the intermediate control where most players and pros would be able to use it. So like the 1619. And then you can have the one where it gives you a little bit more forgiveness. So the blade 104, and I've heard great things about that. So keep the blade as a control, right? Ultra is pretty clear power line. It's actually one of my favorite lines as well, in that it gives you the power, but it doesn't doesn't feel overly stiff. So I think Wilson is fine keeping the Ultra. I'm not sure who uses this on tour actually. It's a very good line for lots of players, but someone please comment if you know who endorses this one on the tour. So now we got rid of the Pro stuff. Now we have 3 other rackets, and I would say 4 other rackets if you include both the RF Future and the RF Pro. So let's start off with not the RF Future or the Pro, but let's start off with the RF, just a regular, the 300. I really didn't like it. I thought it was more of a depolarized frame. It didn't really stand out in any way. So I would say also get rid of that RF, the 300 gram one. Now in terms of spin, right? So we've addressed the power, we've addressed the control, and here's where the nuance is, and where Wilson, I think, it really imprints its DNA on this. So people have loved Wilson, including me, over the years because of the feel of the rackets and that classic Wilson feel, whatever magic they do in making it feel that good. That's something that will differentiate it, in my mind, from a lot of the other lines on the tour, right? Our other racket lines, racket manufacturers. So I would say as your performance spin racket, the RF Pro. And I think it's, I actually think this would have fit CC Pass quite well if you wanted to switch to it. But yeah, performance spin, the RF Pro. And I think as great as it is, it's not going to be one for beginners or a lot of intermediates. I mean, you really have to invest in the racket in terms of your playing style, giving it time, understanding how it works. And if you do, you get excellent touch, and then you also get lots of power and spin. Now, the one that I'd recommend for intermediates and maybe some pros as well is the RF Future. And the caveat being is that it's a 280 gram racket, unstrung. I think this is the best platform racket that Wilson has. And I'll say it again. I said it when it was released initially, and I'll say it again. It's the best platform racket that Wilson has. And this is one where I feel like if you really want to highlight that spin aspect, I would customize it by adding weight at the tip, right? And then add in weight at the base as well to counteract that. And then you could get it up to your desired swing weight and still give you that whippy feel and have that classic Wilson feel, right? So that'll be their intermediate spin level racket. And then in terms of sort of the lower, like I would say the shift, and I'd say it's more for beginners, some intermediates, teaching pros. Like teaching pros absolutely love this racket, just because it gives you like easy power, easy spin. It gets pushed around though, in my opinion, when you're hitting against heavier hitters. But I think in terms of your spin line, I'd say the shift would be sort of the beginner, easy to use spin line. And then Clash. Let me not forget about the Clash. I mean, keeping that comfort theme is great in terms of the Clash. Like, oh yes, I mean, I think you can get that in terms of sales, having that as one of the characteristics. but I would push this into the power line. So you could think of the Ultra as sort of the performance pro level power, right? And then the Clash, like intermediate beginner level power with the added benefit of the increased like comfort. And so that's what I'd say. And like for me, for using the Clash, I mean, this is not a racket I'd use, right? But that being said, I really enjoyed using the, like when I hit with the Clash, I was like, oh, this is just nice and easy. Like I was teaching when I was using it and I was like, I don't really don't have to do much. The ball kind of just goes where I want it to go. It wasn't really an adjustment period. So that's my take. And just to quickly summarize, I would say Ultra as a performance power line, Clash more of the beginner intermediate power line with the benefit of additional comfort. The Blade as your control line, a couple different variations of the Blade. Unfortunately, get rid of the Pro Staff. I love this, but I think the market is moving away from the control-oriented rackets. And then in terms of spin, performance spin, the RF Pro. Intermediate level spin for intermediate players, the RF Future, customize it based on what you need. And for beginners, some intermediates and just a general like racket that you could pick up and use easily, the Shift. So leave a comment, let me know what you think of this, and I think hopefully this is helpful. I'm going to try and talk to the Wilson folks maybe the next couple of months, and I think, yeah, that's it. Have fun, play smart, and see results. This is Andy from Tennis with Andy.